It's time now for a Spider-Man Cinematic Universe.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac YouTube channel. I am your host, MrEliMac, and today I'm going to be hopping into a new series. I don't know how many parts it is right now. I just know that in my head it's currently two of the two things I've organized, but right now it is on the first part of this multi-part series, which is my version of a Spider-Man cinematic universe. And you know how I do these cinematic universes. I take sort of the established history that has been taken and then try to make it my own. And it's particularly when it comes to when the movies get released, because I really don't want to go through all the hassle of recreating something that's already in existence. And hey, if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you could be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. So without any further ado, let's just get into the Spider-Man cinematic universe of it all. Again, as of right now, I only have two parts organized. This first part is called the Peter Parker Saga, and the next part is called the Miles Morales Saga. And there's this particular reason, and it is because I'm going to be using, again, the timeline of the actual movie release dates, with the first one coming out in 2002, and so on and so forth. But what does that mean? Simply put, the Peter Parker Saga will be dealing with movies that have come out in 2002, 2004, 2007, a special one for 2009, 2012, and 2014. And that is going to be the Peter Parker Saga. 6 films to cap off his saga. And then the next saga I'll talk about later will be dealing with Miles Morales. And this saga is currently focused on the movies that focus on Peter Parker. And sort of what I would do if I was the person in charge of Sony at the time when they were making the movies. Basically, if I was Avi Arad and sort of doing story stuff. And so for the first 2 movies in the cinematic universe, I'm not changing what was already made, like Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 that came out in 2002, 2004. I'm keeping them the same. Green Goblin's the main antagonist of the first one, and Doc Ock is the main antagonist of the second one. The stories don't really need to change that much at all. Maybe change some of the characterization of Peter, because personally in my mind, I don't, particularly Tobey Maguire's version, there are moments in those films where I'm like, I'm not a big fan of how he's doing that and how some of that is happening. I'm not a big fan, so do some character changes, and then, you know what, I'm fine with it. But yeah, in this cinematic universe I'm creating, I'm not changing those two at all, because in my opinion, those are the almost idyllic, perfect versions of what you should do for first 2 Spider-Man movies. I think those are great, near perfect. I'm not going to change them at all. Now, Spider-Man 3 is when we start getting into the changes, because for Spider-Man 3, if I were in charge, I would tell Sam Raimi, when he gives us the original draft with Sandman and Vulture and concluding Harry's story, I'm just like, you know what? We're keeping it. That is the story that we're going with. No Venom in this film, because I feel like they really rushed Venom, and also Sam Raimi wasn't really a big fan of Venom. So I'm just like, okay, you know what? We're not gonna touch. We're not gonna touch the original draft. We're not gonna have Venom in the film. It's gonna be Sandman, played by Thomas Hayden Church, Vulture, played by Ben Kingsley, and we're concluding Harry Osborn storyline. We're going to kill Harry Osborn off as well. But also something that we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking an element of, sorry if you're hearing scratching, that's me scratching my finger, but we're going to be keeping the element of Peter and MJ splitting up. We're going to be keeping that element, because I think that element really does work in the story. And it's just going to be a different reaction. Instead of Peter being in the black suit, it's just like him being angry, like vicious towards Harry, and using sort of the darkness that is already established inside of him. And we're also establishing that darkness to show that we're just setting seeds and all that, establishing there is darkness in Peter. And we're seeing that here, and we're especially seeing it with the way he is fighting off the Sandman, because we're keeping the Sandman storyline, and we're retconning that he was the one that killed Uncle Ben, and him learning forgiveness, and having Vulture be the person that's like, oh, I really hate Peter, I really hate this Spider-Man, I want to kill him. And we're giving that story. It's, again, sort of how Sam Raimi initially pitched it. That is what we're keeping. We're not changing it at all. But yeah, we will be having the death of Harry in this story. We're going to have the death of Vulture. We're going to eventually have Peter and Harry make up and have that little full arc of, hey, we're all good now. We're going to fight the bad guys. And Vulture does die in the film. I believe he died in the original pitch as well. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, that's going to be Spider-Man 3. And now we're getting in the super big changes. Because if you remember, after Spider-Man 3 came out, with it being initially Venom and Sandman, the original villain of Spider-Man 4 was going to be Vulture, and Felicia Hardy was going to be introduced as Vultress. I don't remember if they were going to do stuff with her as Black Cat, but she was going to sort of be the daughter of the Vulture. We're changing that. In this film, in Spider-Man 4, it's going to be, we're seeing, though MJ and Peter made up at the end of Spider-Man 3, in this one it's more of just, oh, they're friends. They're not truly getting into a relationship because of the events of Spider-Man 3. In this one, this is when he gets the black suit. The movie will start with him getting the black suit and truly showing the darker path, especially with the introduction of Black Cat. She's going to be involved in this story, showing sort of the darker edge of the universe, of the Spider-Man universe. We'd have cameos from Bruce Campbell's Mysterio. He would appear in it because I just want Bruce Campbell to be Mysterio. It would just be a quick little like side fight over in the end, like sort of the side villains that would just pop in at the beginning and get thwarted by Spider-Man or Mysterio, which would be played by Bruce Campbell, Shocker, and Scorpion. Scorpion would be in it, but he wouldn't serve as a main antagonist. The main antagonist of this film, the way I would do it, would be Kraven the Hunter. Kraven is the main antagonist of the story, but we're also getting introduced to Eddie Brock, who would serve as a rival to Peter at the Daily Bugle. He would not be Venom in this film. We would not see Venom in this film. We would just have Peter in the black suit. But the secondary antagonist of this film would be Lizard, because it would deal with Kraven hunting the Lizard specifically at first, and then we would have Kraven discovering Peter and Peter trying to stop Kraven. Peter would be like, oh, this is the prey I've been looking for. I'm going to hunt the spider. And that would sort of be the story that we would interwoven in sort of the darkness of Kraven being connected to the darkness of the black suit, and how Peter is just full of anger, sort of like how Spider-Man 2 the video game did it, and sort of that connection. I didn't realize when I was putting it together that of how similar it was to Spider-Man 2 until I was like, oh wait, Lizard, Kraven, black suit, that's all sort of there. And that's sort of the way I would tell sort of the story. And I wouldn't do Kraven's Last Hunt because I don't want to end this film with Kraven dying. I want to keep Kraven around just a little bit longer, and you'll understand why. But ultimately, Lizard would be killed by Kraven. Like Dr. Kurt Connors, Kraven would get his hunt and he would kill Lizard. He would kill Dr. Kurt Connors. And Peter would be wanting to unleash. It would get to the point where Kraven is near death, and Peter would stop himself because he's like, no, what am I doing? This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And he would get out of there. And then that's when he would start to realize it's the black suit that's doing it, and he would take off the black suit. That would be the moment where you would see him rip off the black suit, and then Kraven would return later saying, Spider-Man, I want you to come face me. Let me be your final prey. You are my last hunt. But then they would have a final fight of Peter, normal Peter, against Kraven, and Kraven would sort of get the upper hand, but eventually Peter, using his smarts, would beat Kraven, and then Kraven would be arrested and sent to a prison or Ravencroft, whatever prison we would see. Ultimately, as well, Black Cat would sort of be the one filling in the darker urges of Peter, being like, no, you need to do what's necessary. And that would be Peter like, no, I'm not doing this. And Black Cat would leave New York, maybe for something in the future, who knows? I'm not going to reveal future potential ideas. But Black Cat would leave New York. And this movie would also see the introduction of Ned Leeds, who would be working at the Daily Bugle and have a flirtation relationship with Betty Brant, giving them more to do. And we'd also see the introduction of Roderick Kingsley, who would sort of serve as a new millionaire who would start investing in things that he's not supposed to. But that's sort of the idea of Spider-Man 4. And Spider-Man 4 would end with Eddie Brock getting the black suit. That's Spider-Man 4 ending with a little cliffhanger with Eddie Brock getting the black suit. And that movie would have come out in 2009, the original release date for Spider-Man 4 before it was canceled. And then we move on to Spider-Man 5, which would have came out in 2012, which was the release date of the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. And it would start with Peter starting to rekindle his relationship with Mary Jane, him trying to get back together with her, basically him saying, look, I'm not that dark persona anymore, I'm changing, I'm starting to get better. He would quit his job at the Daily Bugle and start trying to become a teacher. He would actually get a teaching job as well at a middle school, not a high school, specifically a middle school, as a science teacher. And the main antagonist of this film would be Venom. This is when we're very much doing the Venom story, but giving it an entire movie. And Rhino would also appear in the film as like the intro villain, like in the Rhino suit and everything. And Eddie Brock would reveal that he is Venom to Peter. Like throughout the movie, he would be toying with him, trying to poke fun at him and like try to needle him, mentioning Harry and Norman and all the failure that he would have in the past, all the things he could have done to potentially redeem them and save them. But ultimately he didn't do that. He failed to save these characters. Even mentioning Kurt Connors, like, oh, you had a chance to save Kurt Connors, but you didn't. You failed him. You let him die at the hands of Kraven, and now Kraven is alive. You should have killed him. Basically trying to pull out the dark urges of Peter, but Peter is able to suppress his dark urges, even though Venom is like, I know what you really want to do. And we would have multiple fight scenes throughout the film of Peter and Venom getting the upper hand every single time until we get the final fight where we would see Venom and Peter going face to face, toe to toe, having this big brawl. And Peter's like, I've learned from my mistakes. I'm going to fight you. And instead of just letting it be a brawl, Peter is able to talk some sense into Venom, and be like, hey, this isn't the person you should be. You can do better than this. You should do better than this. I know that you are a better person. I know Eddie Brock, sure, you are misguided, but you are a good person. You want to be a protector. You want to help people. Showing in the seeds of a lethal protector, sort of. And then with all this talking, Eddie is actually starting to realize, like, oh, I don't want to kill Peter. I just want him to suffer, but I don't want him to suffer anymore. He's right. I want to do good. I want to be a good person. And then Venom, the symbiote, is telling him, no, don't listen to Peter. You should kill him. He's done so much harm to you. He has cost you your job. He has done all this evil. He has done so much bad towards you. And Eddie's like, no. And then we sort of get a psychological battle between Eddie and Venom, with Eddie eventually winning and running away, getting away from Peter. And sure, this may not be quote-unquote satisfying due to it being like a final fight, but I think this would be an interesting way of beating the bad guy and having Eddie survive for potential future things. That could be a part 3. But also in the film, we would introduce Roderick Kingsley's main bodyguard, who is Jason Macendale, who you may recognize as another name for a potential villain. And the movie would end with a mysterious man. We would never see the face. We would just see a silhouette of a man entering an abandoned Oscorp building, building a glider. And that's how Spider-Man 5 would end. And then we move on to the final film of the Peter Parker Saga, which would be Spider-Man 6, which would be released in 2014, the final release of when Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out. And this would be with Peter and MJ fully back together. And the movie would also introduce Miles Morales as a student of Peter. And again, he's in middle school, so he's a kid. He is not there yet as we will all know him to be. But the main antagonist of this film would be the Hobgoblin, and there would be a mystery as well, because in the comics, 3 people took up the mantle of the Hobgoblin in the 80s: Ned Leeds, Jason McIndale, and Roderick Kingsley. So we'd have a hint of a mystery as well of Peter trying to figure out who Hobgoblin is, and there would be moments where each 3 of these characters would have symptoms and ideas and like just a lot of things that could lead each of them to be the Hobgoblin. But also, Hobgoblin would begin to haunt Peter with the sins of his past, with him assembling 5 of Peter's old enemies to one team, and those 5 characters would be Kraven, Shocker, Scorpion, Rhino, and a blackmailed Sandman. Sandman would be blackmailed into joining this team, helping Hobgoblin to fight off Peter. Basically, Hobgoblin is the leader of this version of the Sinister Six. This is a Sinister Six film with Hobgoblin very much the main focus of the evil. And ultimately, Peter would start questioning if he's truly ever helped people. With all this stuff that is happening with, like, the main through line of the second trilogy with 4, 5, and 6 is Spider-Man actually doing any good? Because with all these enemies from his past coming up, and with him failing friends of his like Kurt Connors, is Spider-Man good for the people? And that's when we would get Sandman to eventually help Peter, with Peter being able to save Sandman's daughter and ex-wife from potential threats that Hobgoblin had them under. And Sandman teams up with Peter and takes out Kraven, Shocker, Scorpion, and Rhino, able to take them and save the day. And then ultimately we would end it with a final face-off between Hobgoblin and Peter. They would have this grand epic battle. We would never actually see who's under the mask of the Hobgoblin, but we would have Peter get mortally wounded by Hobgoblin, but it would get to a point where the fight leads to a moment where Hobgoblin is killed in a massive explosion. We would even see where the explosion happens, like Hobgoblin's right there as the bomb goes off, and just Hobgoblin is killed. However, as Hobgoblin is killed, Ned Leeds, Jason McIndale, and Roderick Kingsley go missing the next day. So it's like, oh, who's Hobgoblin? Which one of these 3 is Hobgoblin? We'll never know because they're all missing now. And I would like that to remain a mystery of like, oh no, we're never going to find out who Hobgoblin is. But again, Peter is mortally wounded and he's basically on death's door, but he's able to finally say his final words to MJ and Aunt May, who I will say retconally that she knew that Peter was Spider-Man ever since Spider-Man 2. Like after Spider-Man 2, she was like, oh, Peter's Spider-Man. And she just didn't want to tell him. She wanted to wait until he was ready to tell her. And Peter is on death's door. He is talking to MJ. He is talking to Aunt May, saying sorry for everything. And they're both like, no, you don't have to apologize. You've done good in this world. Spider-Man is a hero, and it's all because of you. And Peter, in this moment, in this film, after fighting the Hobgoblin and the Sinister Six, would die. This movie would also be the death of Peter Parker, and no one would discover that Peter is Spider-Man. They would just know, oh, Spider-Man is dead. But to Aunt May and MJ, it is Peter Parker that has died. And we would have a memorial for him, basically similar to how in Into the Spider-Verse there is a memorial for Peter in that movie, in Spider-Man, for the Spider-Man in that movie. It would be that way for this film. And we would even see J. Jonah Jameson, someone who hates Spider-Man, be like, no, Spider-Man was a hero, and I was wrong about him to say that he was a menace. He was not a menace. He was a hero. And that would sort of wrap up Peter's storyline. But the movie would end with one final thing. It would end with Miles Morales getting bit by a spider. And we will continue that thread in the Miles Morales saga, which would be part 2. But until then, that has been the first part of this new version of the Spider-Man cinematic universe. What have your thoughts been so far? I know a lot of people may be thinking that I am using the shortcut, an easy way to do my version of the cinematic universe, just taking what Sam Raimi had already put forth and doing something completely different. But look, this is my video. This is my way of doing it. I really think that if Sam Raimi would have gotten what he wanted, that we could have had a large, sprawling Spider-Man cinematic saga. And this is my way of doing that saga. And also, I will talk more about this in part 2, but there is some extra little wrinkle in it as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about part 2, because that will be where Miles Morales is the main character. And yeah, what were your thoughts on the idea? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Were you indifferent to it? Whatever your thoughts, comment below. And also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. But until then, I've been Mr. EliMac, you've been the audience, and I hope you all remember to have a great rest of the day.